Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I made it. All the technical difficulties have been taken care of from last night, and I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. And as you do enter, please hit the like button as soon as you enter. I really would appreciate that. But yet we are back, ladies and gentlemen, and it feels really good. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, and I apologize for last night. Um, like I said, there were a few technical difficulties with this device. I mean, it is a relatively new device for me, and sometimes have to work the kinks out of it. Now, originally, this was supposed to be about Dr. Dre and his upcoming divorce about his wife. And I'm going to talk about that as well. But as you notice, I changed the topic to Hollywood swinging for obvious reasons. Um, because as you know, over the past I guess 24 hours, there's been a lot of talk about Jada Pinkett Smith and her alleged affair with this young man, and I'm probably going to screw up his name about a dozen times tonight, but I forgot his freaking name. Jeez. August Alsina. Listen, this is a generational thing, but I don't know a lot of these younger artists, and he was actually introduced to the family by Jaden because that's a friend of his. Um, I'm not going to claim to know the ins and outs of that, and there have been several other people who have done uploads on that, but I do know. Well, I won't say I know, but I allegedly know. I have to say that because obviously, without proof, you don't want to say anything, outlandish and then not have any facts behind it and get sued. So, but as you know, again, the topic is Hollywood swinging. Now, a little caveat to this. Um, Now she has teased Jada Pinkett. She now that she's going to address this on her Facebook watch series Red Table Talk. In fact, she tweeted that earlier today. She says, quote, "There's some healing that needs to happen, so I'm bringing myself to the red table," unquote. Now, Jada Pinkett Smith is 48 years old. Mr. August Alsina is 27. So, wow, a 21-year-old age difference there. And to be quite honest, that's not abnormal, especially for Hollywood. To me, what is the abnormal part is the fact that this young man was allegedly looked at like family. And again, this was a friend of her son's. And to me, that is a taboo. And let's face it, to a lot of civilized people, that is a taboo, no question about it, or at least it should be. But and I'm gonna be honest, me personally, I do believe the young man that he probably had Will's blessing, because let's face it, everybody that's in the know allegedly has realized for many, many years that Will and Jada Pinkett Smith's marriage is a quote unquote marriage of convenience. Um, if I have to explain that to you, then maybe you should be in bed by now. But Now, one thing that I will say is, and everybody knows that Will Smith has been in the public eye for many, many years. Now, a lot of people were introduced to him via the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but many of us that are my generation and older know that Will Smith started out as a rapper. It was DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Now, back in the day, in fact, I remember his very first single, Girls of the World Ain't Nothing But Trouble. And that was a decent single, no question about it. A lot of people labeled him a sellout. I mean, to me, he was more of a crossover rapper. He wasn't, I wouldn't have called him necessarily a sellout. But let's face it, a lot of his stuff after that first couple of albums to me weren't the greatest. Like Parents Just Don't Understand. That was But he caught the eye of one Quincy Jones. And listen, that's another upload for another time. If you look at Quincy Jones's sordid history with young black teenagers, I'm just saying, all you need to do is look at guys like Will Smith, Tevin Campbell, and of course Michael Jackson. And that will be another upload for another time. And the nerve of Quincy Jones. Remember years ago, he brought up Richard Pryor and Marvin Gaye messing with one Marlon Brando back in the day. But again, that's another upload for another time, ladies and gentlemen. But here, I'm going to focus on Will, Jada Pinkett Smith, and of course, the original topic, Dr. Dre and his wife. But I had to address the Will, Jada, and August Alsina thing, and really the genesis of this before the young man came into play, because this goes a lot deeper than that. Let me tell you. Sometimes you'll see me go in and out looking at my device because I have a lot of notes on there. Hey, Jasmine Virgo, how you doing this evening? It's good to see you. I'm glad that you joined me. And hey, listen, feel free to chime in, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, you know me. I acknowledge it as much as I possibly can. In fact, unfortunately, I do it to the point where I get sidetracked, but that's all right. But going back to the Will and Jada's, the genesis of how they got together. Well, I just gave you a little bit of background on Will's early career prior to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which really made him a household name. Fun fact, and Will Smith has acknowledged this himself, he blew all that money he made during the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air years because he was very reckless with his spending. I mean, you could actually make the case that Jada Pinkett helped. In fact, let's face it, she did. No question about it. Jada Pinkett made Will the responsible man, mature guy that he is now. There's no question about it when you look at his past history. Now, if you're familiar with Jada Pinkett Smith's career, many of us were introduced to Jada Pinkett back in the day. In fact, that was the tail end of Different World, is where I remembered really knowing, about her, so to speak. I believe she played Lena James. That was her character in Different World. By that time, I believe Whitley Gilbert, who was Jasmine Guy's character, she was the head of the female dorms in Hillman, if I'm not mistaken. That by that time she was married to Dwayne Wayne. I mean, anybody that's my generation or and above definitely remember those times, and even the younger generation um, should know about Different World, of course, because they've had several reruns. If you notice, they don't even show Different World anymore. They barely show the Cosby Show anymore, and we already know why. We won't even go into that. Hey, Dale, brother Dale, how you doing this evening? Um, but anybody that also knows the history of Jada Pinkett Smith, they know that she was very, very close to one Tupac Shakur because, and in fact, remember they met while going to a school of the arts in Baltimore, Maryland. That was I believe the late 80s. I want to say around 88, 89, something to that effect. And everybody knows that really Tupac was one of the true was the true love of Jada Pinkett's life. I mean, that's common knowledge, allegedly. And in fact, I have said on several occasions, I mean, that basically Will Smith is living Tupac's life. And when I say that, obviously not talking about his hip hop fame, even though his fame was comparable to Pac's, to be fair, even though it's a different type of audience because Tupac was a different type of artist. Obviously, Will Smith is more of a pop mainstream type of hip hop artist. But as far as his acting is concerned, that's where you draw the parallel between Tupac and Will Smith. And to be quite honest, and Will Smith is a wonderful actor. Please don't take it as me knocking Will Smith by any stretch of the imagination because I'm not. Will Smith is a wonderful actor. Tupac was a much better actor. And it's not even, I'm going to be honest, if Pac were alive right now, he would have won an Oscar and a Grammy. I I don't doubt that by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, one of the last films that he did with Jim Belushi, um, I cannot think of the name of that film now. I I want to say Gridlocked, but I don't. I'm not sure the name of the film. In fact, I'm going to look that up now. If somebody in the audience knows it, please let me know because I'm going to look it up. That film, Tupac and Jim Belushi, because Jim Belushi was so enthralled with Pac because Pac would do everything. It was Gridlock. Thank you, Dale. Because he did everything in one take. And that blew Jim Belushi away. And listen, Jim Belushi, you talk about somebody living off of the family name, man. Jeez. No, it was actually gang related. It was gang related. Yeah, see, that's why I looked it up, man. Yeah, Gridlock was the one with what was it? What's her name? Jesus Christ. I can't think of a name right now. Um uh Candy something. Jesus. She was in God damn it. I hate that. Thandie Newton was in that film. Thandie Newton was in that film. I think it was him and Tim Roth. That was yeah. Gridlock was released before he died, but it was Gang Related. Was the movie that I was thinking of with him and Jim Belushi. And Jim Belushi was just enamored with Tupac's talent because he did everything in one take. And see, that's the thing about Pac. See, the thing also about Tupac is he brought stability to Death Row Records, which is another thing that got lost because if you remember, yeah, it was released a year after he died, no question about it. But that was technically his last film. But Gridlocked, that was the other film. But Gang Related was him and Jim Belushi did that film, and Jim Belushi was just enamored with how talented Pac was as an actor. Because let's face it, most rappers turn actors. I mean, there is a bit of a learning curve, but obviously, see, Pac was trained classically as an actor, and obviously his poetry background lent him to his rapping style. And again, the difference between Pac and Biggie is Biggie, off the top of his head, was much better than Pac. And listen, I was a fan of both guys, but I was a bigger fan of Pac. Yeah, Juice, obviously. I mean, that's his classic character when he played Bishop with Omar Epps. I mean, that's the quintessential. Now, my favorite was Above the Rim. And I really necessarily did not like Pac's character, but he played it well. But Above the Rim was my favorite Pac movie, and not just because of Tupac, but the cast of that movie. You remember Leon, Bernie Mac, and Dwayne Martin. And Dwayne Martin also figures in to this upload, Hollywood Swingin', because, and you're going to see how all this is intertwined, ladies and gentlemen, because now I'm not one of these guys who's into the tea, so to speak. That's not my deal. I mean, because let's face it, guys like that normally drink their tea like this, and I don't do that. You understand what I'm saying? And if you do your thing, but that's just not my style. But just the same way I know sports like the back of my hand, there are certain things as far as hip hop and basically the entertainment genre that I'm not going to say I know them like the back of my hand, but I know I have a pretty good knowledge of it, so to speak. Yeah, Poetic Justice. Yeah, of course. I mean, that was a wonderful film too. Yeah, Janet. Yeah, that's when Janet was in. She was at her peak, so to speak. And in fact, that was a great. I remember when they interviewed Tupac, and he was talking about working with Janet Jackson, how they were real close, and then after a while, the phone call stopped once filming was over. And if you remember, Janet Jackson was dealing with Q-tip at the time. And in fact, Pac had to take an HIV test. That's a again, that's a whole other upload, ladies and gentlemen. But going back to the Will and Jada dynamic and how this ties in. Now, Will Smith, one of his buddies from Philly, is Dwayne Martin. And how does this intertwine also? This is almost like, what was that? 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's like 6 Degrees of Will and Jada. because Dwayne Martin was in Above the Rim. In fact, he was the focal point of that film. If you remember, he played the basketball star that was wanted to go to Georgetown, and they had a Rucker type tournament, and his brother was Leon. No, that wasn't his brother. Excuse me. Leon played his mother's man at the time, and he was a basketball prodigy. See how easy I get sidetracked. But anyway, Dwayne Martin and Will Smith were very good friends, and allegedly they were like Eddie Murphy, Johnny Gill close. And if you know about that dynamic, allegedly, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, jeez, I'm sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry. But yeah, Dwayne and Will, mighty close. And Dwayne Martin, in fact, if you remember, they had a series. All of Us. You remember that series with Chris Rock? I mean, Chris Rock's brother, Tony Rock. Excuse me. And Lisa Ray. In fact, I believe at that time it was Lisa Ray McCoy. And if you know Lisa Ray, remember her from the Players Club, among many other movies. I got you cracking up, huh? Hey, who says I don't have a sense of humor? Um, but how is this intertwined, ladies and gentlemen? Not only that, if you remember, Dwayne Martin was married for several years too. Hey, you know it. Yeah, black actors. That was like the golden era for black actors. Was like the 90s up to about, I want to say 2000. I want to say about 2004, 2005. That was like the apex. Yep, I'm getting there, Jasmine Virgo. See, you're jumping ahead of me now. Dwayne Martin was married for several years to Tisha Campbell Martin. And we all know who Tisha Campbell is. She's best known as Gina from Martin. We already know that. But if you remember, prior to that, she was in what movie? You should know that. That's Spike. Now forget House Party. We know that about House Party. But I remember her from School Days, that Spike Lee movie. In fact, her and Jasmine Guy were both in that movie. And Tisha Campbell was the lead singer. I cannot think of the name of that damn group to save my life. But I remember that song, I don't want to be alone tonight. I tell you, if you remember that one, then yeah, she was in Little Shop of Horrors also. But remember for several years, yeah, she was Tisha Campbell in School Days, yeah. Yeah, that's when the Gamma Rays. I remember that. Yeah, Lawrence Fishburne, Spike Lee, bugging out. I believe his name is Giancarlo Esposito. I hope I'm gotten that correct. He's had a very long and distinguished career in Hollywood, no question about it. But how is this all intertwined with Will and Jada? Of course. Will and Jada were the executive producers of All of Us. In fact, if you look at the credits at the beginning of the show, I believe it was Overbrook Entertainment. Overbrook is a high school in Philadelphia. And among the several stars that came out of Overbrook High, obviously Will and them. But if you were a sports person, and obviously I am, before Will, the biggest star that Overbrook High had, literally the biggest star, was the basketball legend, Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain. And remember, Wilt Chamberlain was a legit 7'1", 300 pounds. And yes, he is the only NBA player to have scored 100 points in a game. And if you remember, yeah, that's right. You don't remember Jada being on Different World with Jasmine Guy? Yeah, I was talking about that earlier in the video. She was Lena James. In fact, she had a little bit of her and Whitley Gilbert clashed heads in the show because if you remember, she had a little bit of a thing for Dwayne Wade. And we all know the Whitley Gilbert Dwayne Wade dynamic in that show. In fact, that dynamic saved the show because if you remember, that show was built originally around Denise Huxtable, aka Lisa Bonet, aka You Couldn't Keep a Job, and Cosby looked out for that woman as much as he possibly could, and she still threw him under the bus. And if you remember, they always had a contentious relationship. You know what? My revisionist history is pretty sharp tonight. But getting back to their dynamic, as I mentioned before, Dwayne Martin and Will were mighty close. But the Lisa Ray dynamic was, if you remember, Dwayne Martin and Lisa Ray were in that show, All of Us, as I mentioned before. And Elsie Neal was in that show also. You remember her, of course, from being in the Huleys. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Lisa Ray was married to a guy, I forgot his first name, but it was remember, she had the surname Lisa Ray McCoy. Now, at one time, Lisa Ray and Dwayne Martin were close. They were very good friends. But they had a huge falling out because, according to Lisa Ray, Dwayne Martin was helping her husband cheat with other guys. Yes, Tisha Campbell appeared. I remember that episode of A Different World. And if you remember that episode, I'm glad you brought that up, Dale. That particular episode, Tisha Campbell had contracted HIV and I believe had full-blown AIDS. Because if you remember, Whoopi Goldberg was the professor in that particular episode of A Different World. I am so happy you brought that up. Yeah, that is a classic episode of A Different World. That's one of the, in my estimation, 5 classic episodes of Different World. That's one of those episodes I can watch several times over. But yeah, if you get a chance, Google that. And I know I'm right when it comes to that because I've seen that so many times. And Tisha Campbell, her character was working at the pit with Mr. Gaines. And a lot of people was like, oh, no, I don't. In fact, I forgot. That's funny. The character who did that, her name was Gina. And she was like, nah, girl, I'll have somebody else serve my food. You know. I cannot think. And remember, that character was in an abusive relationship with a rap artist at Hillman. Yeah, listen, I know that show like this, like the back of my hand. But going back to Lisa Ray and the Dwayne Martin um, dynamic, she claims that he was helping her cheat. In fact, you can Google that. In fact, there are several videos where Lisa Ray just layeth the smacketh down on Dwayne Martin. He's a snake. He's a BAN. You already know what I mean. I'm trying to keep this as clean as possible. I understand it's late night, but there's certain times, because I want to make sure that this reaches as much of an audience as possible. But yeah, that was the end of that marriage, and also the Tisha Campbell Dwayne Martin marriage, if you remember, just recently ended a couple of years ago. Because allegedly, again, Dwayne and Will, mighty close. And he was not to be trusted, so obviously he was helping himself. And let's face it, it is Hollywood. Hollywood swinging. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. But that was the dynamic with that. And that leads us up to Will and Jada, of course, their marriage of convenience, so to speak. And let's face it, that's not the first time, by the way, that they have been linked to stepping outside of their marriage. I mean, Will has been linked to several people. Yeah, that is another alleged rumor as well, that they were swinging with Mark Anthony and J-Lo. Now, obviously, I have to use the term allegedly because there is no proof of that. But yeah, they definitely have been linked with that as well. Yeah. But when you look at yeah, Jasmine Virgo, when you get a chance to Google that one as well. As I mentioned earlier, Will Smith is literally living Tupac's life. And now Tupac was actually linked to not only Jada Pinkett, but he was also linked to Lisa Left Eye Lopez from TLC. And when you get a chance, make sure to Google that, ladies and gentlemen. And in fact, if you remember Tupac and Andre Rison, and if for those of you who do not know who Andre Rison is, he was a wide receiver in the NFL for several seasons. Now, he had his best seasons with the Atlanta Falcons. And of course, Faith Evans. Yeah, that's that's a whole nother deal. That's a whole nother deal. That's the Tupac Biggie deal. I remember that. Yeah. And if you remember, he actually won a Super Bowl ring with the Green Bay Packers. but he was at his best with the Atlanta Falcons. When he went to Cleveland, he was on the downside of his career. And I also remember him with the Indianapolis Colts as well. But Andre Rison was a very productive wide receiver. In fact, now that's also a Deion Sanders dynamic, but that's another chapter, another book. See, you guys are going to have me up here all night. I'm not going to do it. Or in Mr. Brown voice, I'm not fit to do it. But that's another dynamic. But Tupac and Andre Rison were cool, but Left Eye was infatuated with Tupac. Tupac, in Left Eye's mind, allegedly, Tupac was Left Eye's soulmate. And in fact, they slept together on numerous occasions. Not only that, if you remember, Left Eye actually had left TLC and it went to Death Row Records. Now, she had an album that was never released on Death Row Records called Supernova. When you get a chance, Google that as well. And the reason that I say that is I never want anybody to take my word for anything. And to me, there's nothing worse than somebody who doesn't know what the heck they're talking about. That drives me absolutely crazy. And then they swear that their word is the gospel. And then you find out, man, this guy was full of ish. And that's how you lose credibility. See, everything I say, I can back it up. And Brother Dale, you know how, listen, you've known me for a long time. You know how I get down when it comes to information, brother. You know how I am with that. So, I mean, that's why I take the time out to break everything down as well as I possibly can. But that is the Will and Jada dynamic. And I've spent a lot of time on that, and I figured that I would. But let me go to the other end of the spectrum, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, as I mentioned before, she's supposed to, she meaning Jada Pinkett, is supposed to clear up this on her Red Table Talk thing. I appreciate that, brother. I definitely appreciate that. Now, I don't know when that particular episode will come on, but I'm pretty sure that it will shortly. Please hit the like button. I thank you so much for joining me this evening. And once again, I apologize for not being able to come on last night due to technical difficulties. As you see, it's been a little sporadic today, too. It's a little, yeah, that's right, red table. So you know she's gonna be dishing it out. You know, she's she's a little special on that red table, let me tell you. But that's the end of that dynamic with the Will and Jada deal. And see how all these other people are intertwined with that. But now it is time for me to turn my attention to the original topic before I switched up and went Hollywood swinging. And that is Mr. Andre Young and AKA Dr. Dre. And why did I do that? If you remember, and listen, everybody knows by now the world-class Wrecking Crew. I'm pretty sure y'all have all seen Straight Outta Compton. So y'all know a lot of the Dr. Dre dynamic. when it comes to that. And as we know, 3 days ago, Dr. Dre and his wife, Nicole Young, filed for divorce. They've been married for 24 years. Now, what a lot of people don't know is Dr. Dre's wife, Nicole, was married before she got with Dre. She was married to a basketball player named Sedale Threet. Sedale Threet used to play for the Philadelphia 76ers, the Seattle Supersonics, and the LA Lakers. I remember him specifically because they had gotten Sedale Threet to play a lot. He was going to play a lot of point because Magic Johnson at that time was 31 years old, and they did not want him to have to log so many minutes at the point guard position. The Lakers were going to have like a 3-guard alignment with him. It was going to be Magic, Byron Scott, and Sedale Threet. And Sedale Threet was going to handle the ball a lot more. But of course, those plans were thwarted because, remember, Magic Johnson had contracted the HIV virus and was literally forced to retire. That was after the 91 season. And it was prior, the announcement I'll never forget, that was in November. I believe it was either November 1st or 2nd of 1991. And that's why I remember Sedale Threet, because he ended up being the starting point guard for the Lakers at that time. And in fact, that Laker team almost beat the Western Conference champions in the first round, the Phoenix Suns, led by one Charles Barkley. But now I'm getting a little off topic. Yes, it was during the 91-92 season, no question about it. I remember that very, very well. And in fact, I was wrong because that was the following season where the Lakers took the team to the brink, took the Phoenix Suns to the brink. And it gave Charles and those guys all it could muster. I remember that All-Star game, too, where Magic was the MVP, 92 season. But again, this is not about him. That's a whole nother upload, ladies and gentlemen, and I will do one in the not-so-distant future. But Dre, that's how she got into L.A. Now, they share 2 adult children, a 23-year-old son, Truist, and a 19-year-old daughter, Truly. Now, Dr. Dre did not have a prenup. Now, if you know anything about the marital equity in the state of California, if you do not have a prenuptial agreement, that is automatically split right down the middle. Now, Dre is not quite a billionaire. Contrary to popular belief, a lot of people thought that after he sold his share of Beats by Dre that he was a billionaire. He is not. But and by California law, that is split straight down the middle. No, I didn't say Dre and Miss Chalet had 2 kids. I said Dre and his soon-to-be ex-wife had 2 kids. Now, I believe he might have 2 kids by Miss Chalet. I will look that up for you right now. I know that he does have kids by Miss Chalet. if I'm not mistaken. Well, when he wasn't beating the. In fact, she has a son by Dr. Dre. Oh, okay. Yep. In fact, Marcel Young is the name of Dre and Michele's son. Yeah. Wow. Wow, man. And that's how you found out about the his announcement to retire. I actually saw that he had a press conference where he announced his retirement, and that's after that he went on the Arsenio Hall show. Um, but yeah, see, in fact, that's what I was going to bring up. See, Dr. Dre, we know, has a very checkered past when it comes to females. I'm gonna just put it that way. Alleged, well, not allegedly. I mean, this isn't alleged. This is actual common knowledge. Um, yeah, it was a Friday, no question about it. He made the announcement actually earlier. He had a press conference, but if you saw the Lifetime movie about Michelle and that dynamic with Dr. Dre and Suge Knight, um, and she is a very strong woman, no question about it. And I tell you what, I don't know if you watched this show, um, Marriage Celebrity Boot Camp Hip Hop Edition. The last season, Michelle was on there with another guy, and Michelle really, I mean, she's been through a lot, and unfortunately, a lot of times you bring that baggage with you into your next relationship, and she did that to this poor young man, and he was head over heels for Michelle. But I mean, she didn't dog him, so to speak, because Michelle, I mean, the way she carries herself, she seems like she's a very nice person. She really does. Like, she seems like she has a heart of gold. But she was really, yep, yeah. I remember the late great Tim Dog had beef with Dre. Yeah, he had beef with the entire NWA. You remember F. Compton and Step Timmy, and you know what, and the genesis of that I'm going to get to in just a moment. But I just want to explain the dynamic between um, Dre and Michelle. I mean, Dre was very abusive towards her, no question about it. Allegedly, well, not allegedly. I mean, there's actual restraining orders. There are court documents that acknowledge this. But going to the Tim Dog, the genesis of the Tim Dog Dr. Dre thing was back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. There was a show that used to come on late night on Fox called Pump It Up with Dee Barnes. And Dee Barnes was an LA radio personality. Yep, Dee Barnes. You know where I'm going with that. Now, Dre had beat up Dee Barnes. And in fact, he was arrested. He was facing charges. But they ended up giving him community service, and he had to do a commercial. And if you remember, I mean, and it was a BS commercial, let me tell you, where all he did, like, and what a joke that is. There was supposed to be some guy get ready to strike his significant other, and Dre holds up his hand and says, I mean, you could tell he didn't. And at the end of the video, he goes, "This is Dr. Dre from NWA." And they talk about how domestic violence isn't good, and obviously it's not. I mean, it's and yeah, Dee Barnes. Yeah, she hosted a radio show on K-Day, and she was the host of that Fox show, Pump It Up. Yeah, very ironic, no question about it. It's very sad how Dre has gotten away with this on several occasions. And in fact, I'm going to, and this is according to highsnobarity.com, but I definitely remember that. Dr. Dre is one of the biggest success stories in all of hip hop. Now, this was back August 6, 2015, is when this particular report was done. And the person who did it was Alec Banks. Now, just a moment. Now, in the late 80s, early 90s, Denise Dee Barnes was both known as a rapper and television personality. As an artist, she notably released material on Delicious Vinyl. Damn, I remember that. Delicious Vinyl was a record label on the West Coast that bought out Tone Loc and Young MC. And if you remember those times in hip hop, you remember Tim Dog. I mean, not Tim Dog. God, Tone Loc. See, have me talking about Tim Dog, man. I have to blame it on you. Yeah, Tone Loc and Young MC were off of that Delicious Vinyl record label. It's a very important label in the history of West Coast hip hop, no question about it. Now, she also appeared on the Dr. Dre produced West Coast Rap All Stars 1990 posse cut We're All in the Same Gang, which saw her featured along with the likes of King T, Tone Loc, Ice-T, Dr. Dre, MC Ren, Eazy-E, MC Hammer, and more. As a TV host, she anchored Fox's program Pump It Up, which first debuted in 1989 and saw her interviewing the likes of De La Soul, the Beastie Boys, Heavy D, Biz Markie, and many more notable acts of the era. During the same time, NWA was entrenched in bitterness between its remaining members, Eazy-E, MC Ren, DJ Yella, and Dr. Dre, and Ice Cube, but left the group in December of 89, over disputes about music royalties he felt was owed to him for his contributions to their debut album, Straight Out of Compton. When it came time for Ice Cube to air his feelings about his former group, he looked no further than Dee Barnes and her show's prominent platform. While the interview in question doesn't exist online, Barnes recalled the content to the source in 1992, saying, "A year or two into the show, as things are going, I tried that much. I got him on and we did a nice little interview." This goes on in October of 1990. About a week later, I do an interview with Yo-Yo on the set of Boys in the Hood, and Cube was there. And Cube came in the middle of the interview and said some things about NWA. Because at that time, they were having a riff out here. The producer at the time, Jeff Shore, he was the one that put the segment in. Cube just said it joking, and I was left standing there. The cameras were still rolling, so I said, "Sister D, always in the middle of controversy right here on Pump It Up. You know, what am I going to do?" Yeah, Pump It Up was the West Coast equivalent of video use music box. And yeah, I remember Yo-Yo. You can't play with my Yo-Yo. Don't try and play me out. Don't try and play me out. Yeah, I remember her. And I remember she had a song about domestic violence as well. But then Jeff Shore said, cut. That's great. I'm going to put it on the NWA show. He said it right there. And I said, nah, you crazy? I don't want those two groups fighting anymore. I didn't want to be because of Pump It Up, like we instigated something. And on January 27th, 1991, during a record release party for BWP, that's Bees with Problems. If you remember, they had a whole slew of those groups back in the day on the West Coast. At Hollywood's Popanuk Club, Dr. Dre confronted Dee Barnes over the TV package in question. An LA Times report in June of that year didn't reveal any specific details of the attack, but it did note that Barnes had filed a $22 million lawsuit against Dr. Dre for assault and battery and emotional distress, and charged the other NWA members with libel, slander, and emotional distress. Eazy-E elaborated on what NWA thought was a disrespectful move by Dee Barnes and her Pump It Up producers, commenting to the source, it's like this. We did Pump It Up. We did a little something on him, Ice Cube. She, meaning Dee Barnes, set it up. Then she had him come back and do his little clip on us. So we figured everybody that's going to be setting us up to do these shows and interviews, that's all of a sudden slide him in after they hear our side of the ish, that make us look like clowns. We F it up everybody. Everybody. I don't give a F who it is. On July 23rd, 1991, the LA Times ran a follow-up to their initial report with a first-hand account from Barnes as to what exactly took place. He, Dr. Dre, picked me up by my hair and my ear and smashed my face and body into the wall. Next thing I know, I'm down on the ground and he's kicking me in the ribs and stamping on my fingers, and I ran into the woman's bathroom to hide, but he burst through the door and started bashing me in the back of the head. With no video evidence to tie Dre to the assault, one could assume that he could have potentially gotten out of hot water and he and his NWA cohorts gone had he and his NWA cohorts gone silent on the allegations. However, Eazy-E, MC Ren, and Dr. Dre himself took the exact opposite approach. In speaking with Rolling Stone magazine in August of 91, Ren remarked, she deserved it. B deserved it. While Eazy-E echoed his sentiment saying, yeah, B had it coming. Now, that so-called gentleman in a different light, because I'm going to be honest, I did not know that they backed Dre in this garbage. Even Dr. Dre himself thought he should was dating. People talk all this ish, but you know, somebody F's with me, I'm going to F with them. I just did it, you know. Ain't nobody you can do now, ain't nothing you can do now, by talking about it. Besides, it ain't no big thing. I just threw her in, I just threw her through a door. Let me pause right there. That's some BAN-ish right there. And that lets you know how big of a punk Dr. Dre is, okay? You notice he didn't do any of that garbage to Suge. See, he couldn't do that to a guy. But he could have, and if you remember, Dee Barnes is about $115 at best. Dee Barnes, very slim young lady. And at best is about maybe 5'3". Oh, I've been lost respect for Dre. And I tell you what, based on this, I lost a lot of respect for Ren and Eazy. And I mean, there's backing your people, but then you have to draw a line somewhere. You know, no comment And listen, they were young. I get it, but I can't condone any of that garbage. And to my point, 26-year-old Dr. Dre pled no contest to misdemeanor battery charges and was fined $2,500, sentenced to 240 hours of community service and 24-month probation. Judge Frederick Wapner, and if you remember Judge Wapner, he was the original host of the People's Court, was Judge Wapner. He was the original judge on People's Court, which is now being headed by, I guess Frances Millian is her name. I'm not even sure. I don't watch. But he also ordered Dre to pay $1,000 to the California Victims Restitution Fund and to produce the aforementioned anti-violence public service television announcement that I spoke on earlier in this upload. While no one can be exactly sure why, and this is something I did not know, Barnes herself never received a settlement. Newsweek reported in June of '91 that Barnes' lawyer had offered not to bring up the suit if Dre would help her group with some music. Now, that was a mistake by Dee Barnes, by the way. Dee Barnes was supposed to hit him where it hurt. And for her to settle for that lets you know how naive she was to the music business. In a 1991 diss song, and this comes back to you, Brother Dale, because you certainly brought it out. In a 1991 diss song against the entire West Coast entitled F. Compton, New York MC Tim Dog rap, I'll crush Ice Cube, I'm cool with Ice-T, but NWA ain't F to me. I remember that one. Dre beating on D for Pump It Up. Step to the dog and get effed up. I remember that. Oh, man. When Eazy-E and Dr. Dre's feud intensified after Dre left NWA, Eazy-E made mention of Dre's attack on Dee Barnes on several records, especially Real Mother Effin' G's. He quit beating up a B, don't make you S. And then said, it's on. Body slamming B's make Dre a bigger man. And on What Would You Do, another one of Eazy's albums, Dr. Dre straight buster, never broke a law in his life besides beating up Ricky Harris's wife. Well, let's face it. Dre opens himself up to all of this garbage because he is a straight up, he's a B. And on Eminem's debut album, that Guilty Conscience song, Eminem cracked, you're going to take advice from somebody who slapped Dee Barnes? Now, that was at the beginning of their relationship. And in fact, Eminem claimed that he was unsure if Dre would find humor in the line. And according to the book, Eminem, The Stories Behind Every Song, Dre actually fell off his chair from laughing so hard upon hearing it. Now that is an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace that he would find beating up a woman funny. Now, unfortunately, I would expect something like that from Eminem. But unfortunately, by the way Dre has carried himself, you can expect nothing less from his simple behind. And I tell you what, that also brings you to the falling out between Tupac and Dre, but that's another story. Now, in a conversation with Huffington Post Live, I'm On Monday, Vibe magazine's editor-in-chief Dalton Thomas said of the incident between Dr. Dre and Dee Barnes, it's a moment that needs to be documented because it shows that this man doesn't have any shiny spots on his resume. Excuse me. He has those dark moments. It is something that he had to answer for, and I think he does step up and try to talk about it when addressed. That's somebody trying to cover Dre's behind, it sounds like to me. But it's hard to address him about it because he doesn't do interviews like that. He just said it was an unfortunate incident. It's just hard to get those really deep answers to those questions that you want from Dre. Oh, he'll never give you those answers. You know that because Dre wants you to forget as much about it as possible if you can't forget about it altogether. And now I won't even touch on the Tupac Dre deal. That'll be another upload. But 24 years later, well, several years later, here we are with Dre about to be divorced after 24 years. And I'm pretty sure that his wife has probably dealt with some form of abuse, allegedly. But she stayed in it for just this very moment. And I can guarantee you that divorce is going to be, yeah, Snoop. You know what? I'm probably going to do another upload. I will probably do an upload called The Real Dre. But I had to combine both Dr. Dre, Will, and Jada. I had to combine all of it today because I just couldn't ignore it. But yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, one could look at it as, oh, he's about to lose half his joint. But it's much bigger than that. When you spent 20 some odd years with a person, listen, they're entitled to at least half. They spent just about half their lives together. There should not be any true haggling about who should get what. And she has produced 2 kids by him. So, listen. Try and show some class if you possibly can, Dre. And just move on to the next chapter of your life. It will be very interesting to see what happens during these proceedings. But I will end it with that. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining me this evening. Please make sure to hit the like button on the way out. Please like, share, and subscribe. This is Uncle Claude signing off. Take care, and God bless.